Last time on D&D, featuring Adrian Silverstrength, the human paladin, Apostrophe, the Goliath cleric, Dickpoop, the elven wizard, Morsus Firebeard, the hill dwarf cleric, and Rex James, the bronze dragonborn bard. Alright, on this one I thought I'd do something a little different. I thought, because in this game I'd written backgrounds for all the characters and how they would come together, I thought I would start first by kind of just reading each of their origins to understand the characters and stuff like that. So we're going to start off with Adrian Silverstrength. Adrian Silverstrength's true parents remain unknown. As an infant, Adrian was raised by the people who celebrated and followed the goddess Prena, who celebrates sexuality and basically encourages everyone to enjoy sexuality and has a very hedonistic kind of view where you can enjoy, no matter what your gender is, you can enjoy man or woman as long as you are both agreeing to the enjoyment and stuff like that. So she just celebrates the sensation of enjoyment, pretty much. Adrian suspects that his mother was a part of this church, and because of the hedonism, may have never known who the true father was. Because of the hedonistic lifestyle of the people who followed Prena, it was not uncommon for the children to be raised by the community rather than the individual parents. When tieflings began to be born, which at this time was still fairly unrare that tieflings were existing in the world yet, when they began to be born in the church where Adrian lived, which was predominantly human, the surrounding towns began to believe that the church was cursed and that their hedonistic ways may have perhaps upset Florenza, who is the main goddess, the mother as they refer to her, or even Ariana, who is the goddess of fertility. The towns drove the people of the Church of Prena away. One of the members, a man by the name of Boris Darkstorm, and his wife Alina Darkstorm, both rallied the people and told them that they should extract their revenge against those who would drive them away. Boris and Alina convinced the followers that the town had begged this curse to be thrown down upon them. Though normally respectful of all life, the followers grew angry and agreed that revenge should be extracted against this small town called the Fallen Edge. Boris and Alina led the church in the attack against the people of the Fallen Edge, when suddenly a paladin by the name of Orias Silverstrength appeared and revealed that Boris was actually an incubus demon and Alina was a succubus demon, and that they were the reasons that tieflings were actually beginning to spring up in the organization. Adrian, who was still young, watched as Boris and Lena revealed their true demonic forms and fought against Arias, who slew them both and escorted the people back to the Fallen Edge, where he spoke on their behalf, including the tiefling children, saying that they should be welcomed and embraced. They can still grow up to be good and pure, and they were once again welcomed back into the city of the Fallen Edge, basically due to Arias. Adrian had spent years wishing he'd be like Arias, when one night he was visited by Prena herself in a dream, who said that there will be others that will try to do what these demons have done, and asked Adrian to take up sword and shield in her name. Adrian awoke, invigorated, and agreed to this notion, and he felt rejuvenated like he had never been before. He adopted Arias' last name because he'd been so inspired by Arias, and he never truly had a last name. So Adrian took up the last name of Silverstrength. During one of his travels, he'd been staying with a group of wood elves when an ancient green dragon by the name of Emerith arrived. With little effort, she decimated the wood elves, leaving very few survivors. She killed for the simple pleasure of killing, not even for conquering the area. By the grace of luck, and perhaps his goddess, Adrian survived the encounter with the dragon, but witnessed her evil and her destruction, and it shook Adrian to the core. He knew that one day he would probably face her again. He heard reports that she was last seen headed to the new continent. Booking passage aboard the Wavehammer, he headed towards this new continent. Next we're going to cover Apostrophe. Apostrophe grew up among the high mountain peaks of the Spine Mountains, among the rest of his tribe known as the Kalimven, which in short stands for of stone and sky. Like all Goliaths, he had no true interest in the world below that dealt with humanoids such as elves, humans, dwarves, and half-men and halflings. But in the year 1110, something changed. The very air, even at the peaks of the Spine Mountains, had changed. The scent of death, like nothing before, lingered heavily in the air. Something in the world had changed and swayed the balance between life and death in favor of death. But this was not a natural death. This was foul, and even among the Goliaths, they could taste it in the air, and in the food and in their drink. It tainted everything. Scouts were sent down to investigate what was going on and returned a few short years later to report that there had been a great war happening among the mortals. An ancient elf by the name of the Ashen Elf had raised a great army of undead in order to fight the orcs, specifically a large band of orcs known as the Broken Hand. In the year 1124, something even more bizarre happened. The scent of death had faded, and suddenly portals in the heavens opened everywhere, and dragons of all colors and metal poured through them, once again re-entering the world of New Earth. Apostrophe knew that, according to the shamans of his tribe, the dragons once lived and ruled across these lands just before the battle with the gods spread across the lands. Somehow, these dragons had been tricked into fleeing, where they were imprisoned and cut off from the world. How had they come back? What kind of omen was this? The answer would come in the form of an ancient silver dragon named Rawdane. While normally not one to be impressed by anything of any size, Apostrophe's tribe was in awe of this majestic beast. Rawdane explained that the world was still in great danger, that the chromatic dragons would settle in the world, but they would soon seek a way to bring back Tiamat, the goddess of doom, the five-headed chromatic dragon. Rawdane became an honorary member of the Kalimben tribe. Rawdane spent time with Apostrophe and taught him the way of the gathered, focusing on the gods of light. One hot summer, Rawdane returned severely injured and claimed that an ancient foe of his, an ancient female green dragon named Emerith, had ambushed him. Apostrophe took it upon himself to track down Emerith and extract revenge for harming someone that the Goliaths highly regarded as a special guest and member of their tribe. Apostrophe began his descent down the Spine Mountain in 1136, heard the news that Emerith had been traveling across the seas to a new continent, where she continued her reign of terror. He eventually reached a port city and booked passage aboard the Wavehammer. Next we go to Dick Poop. Growing up in Skytree, Dick, like most other high elves, saw himself pretty much the same as the forests that stood so high. They were above everyone else. At a young age, Dick had been gazing out from his home of his parents, high above the forest tree line, and saw a world beyond the woods. While he was born with the innate magic most high elves possessed, Dick hungered for more knowledge, more control over his magical abilities. When he asked his parents about going to the Tower of Magi, his parents refused it, because other races were there, such as humans and dwarves and halflings, and their fear is that their son would be referred to as one of the Grey Elves. Grey Elves in this world are those elves who choose to travel among the humans. When speaking with his professor, a high elf by the name of Avon Greenstone, the professor assured him that it was true. Humans were often corrupted by the sensation of magic, and they do indeed study at the Tower of Magi. He went on to explain that the Tower of Magi was a neutral place where both good and evil studied, and that only necromancy and necromancers were forbidden from ever entering the Tower of Magi. While the High Elves focused on magic that centered around nature and life, the Tower of Magi was a much wider, broad study of magic. This was all that Dick needed to hear. One night, he ran away from home, leaving everything he knew behind him, and eventually found a wizard that took him under his wing, named Greyfall. With Greyfall's guidance, Dick was able to gain entrance into the Tower of the Magi and learned how to truly become a wizard. When reports of a new continent surfaced and that ancient temples and magical items were being recovered, Greyfall booked a passage aboard the Wavehammer for Dick, who was eager to recover some of these magical items so that they can study them and bring them back to the Tower of Magi. Next we go into Rex Jams. Rex Jams is an unusual bronze dragonborn for his kind. Though most of his kind adopts the stronger militant view of the dragon heritage, Rex seems to have adopted a stronger side of the mortal heritage, in which he was more curious about the world. As he walked the world of Taim, he found himself always drawn to local taverns. It was there he would hear the heroic tales of other adventurers. Undoubtedly some were probably over-exaggerated in their retelling of the events. It was while he was in such a tavern that a local bard by the name of Helios Two-Tone caught his attention. The bard sat in a corner spinning endless tales of heroism, rarely about his own, but usually about the others that he had met, and sometimes even traveled with. To enhance his storytelling, Helios often used musical instruments to set the tone as he spoke. This certainly appealed to Rex, who appreciated not only the music, but the way he was able to weave the story with the music. After Helios was done singing the tales of heroes that he encountered, Rex approached him and asked to learn from him. Together, the half-elf Helios and Rex traveled the land together, but Helios kept on the move, not just because he liked to travel, but because he was actually heavily in debt to a human by the name of Gargan Blackmane. And one day, Gargan caught up to Helios and demanded his money. When Helios explained that he did not have the money, Gargan stabbed the half-elf in the heart and left him to die, just as Rex came into the alley and saw his good friend crumpled on the ground. When Gargan and his men finally left the alley, Rex rushed to his friend's side and held him in his arms until Helios' life fled from his eyes. Rex spent days following Gargan and swearing that one day he would get his revenge. When news of this new continent surfaced along with treasures being discovered, Gargan booked passage aboard the Wavehammer, and so did Rex. Rex was hoping that either on the ship or on this new continent, he would be able to extract his revenge. Next, we have Morsus Firebeard. The player who plays Morsus Firebeard actually wrote his own origin. Morsus grew up in a small community which had little communication with the rest of the world. The entire town was devoted to the worship of Florenza, and fanatically so. The heads of the church and community leaders emphasized how Florenza was the most powerful goddess and the only one really worth worshipping. Worship of any other deity was considered wrong and a distraction from the most important deity of all, Florenza. They were taught that the outside world was an evil place, which was full of dark and full of heresy. They had kept their walls closed to keep the outside world out to protect themselves. Morsus, however, had a different thought. It wasn't enough to hide and do nothing. The people of the rest of the world needed to know of Florenza and her power, and that she was the one to be worshipped, and that the forces of darkness needed to be destroyed. Against the advice of his peers, Morsus booked a passage on the Wavehammer to spread the love and knowledge of Florenza and purge the land of heresy. Now onto the notes for the actual adventure. Prospect of adventure in a fairly new discovered continent had drawn the attention of each of you. And though you did not know one another before your voyage, each of you had used the last bit of your coin to basically book passage aboard the Wavehammer, a massive sailing ship. The journey was going to take weeks, which led to each of you getting to know one another, sharing what little you cared to share with one another. The captain, a minotaur by the name of Trihorn, is concerned because there are several storms that he's been forced to sail around, causing unavoidable delays in the voyage. These delays lead to being on the open sea during the hollowing. During the hollowing, the sun and the moons eclipse one another, and for 12 hours the world is plunged into complete darkness, where the veil between life and death is at its weakest points. And the demons are known to enter the world of planes in hopes of harvesting souls. The benefit to being out in the open sea is that there are no demons seeking to harvest souls. However, some of the other effects of the hollowing cause magic and nature itself to behave unusually. Just as the moon overcomes the sun and blankets the world in darkness, there is the sound of something breaking out in the water. Then giant tentacles wrap around portions of the ship. Screams and shouts fill the pitch-black night as you hear Trihorn's voice shout. Then the sound of the boat snapping, sounding like someone running across a field of dry leaves. Pieces of the ship collide into one another as each of you try to keep your balance, but it's not long before you each lose sight of one another. Then, out in the ocean, there's only darkness. Time passes, and you don't know if it's been minutes, hours, or even days. But each of you awaken on a sandy shore, and by the looks of it, this is not a new continent, but rather a jungle island. The stormy skies have cleared, and an intense heat lingers in the air, as if the moisture were being pulled directly from your skin. As you glance around, it does not appear that there are any other survivors from this shipwreck. Or if there are, they didn't land on this stretch of the beach. There are several bodies that have tumbled in the waves, bathed in crimson tides. Some appear to have been partially devoured, either by the kraken, or sharks, or some other creatures of the sea. As the minutes pass, it becomes increasingly hotter. The heat seems to extract every ounce of moisture from your body, making it more and more difficult to do anything as simple as breathe. Rex begins to look around and actually recovers a chest buried halfway in the sand, and within it there's 300 gold pieces. He also takes notice that there are tiny footprints found on the sand that indicate that there is something else on the island. You are not alone. As you cut your way through the jungle, it seems determined to prevent you from gaining entrance and finding shade from the sun. Something catches your eye. There are some branches that look like they've been broken, and not by natural means. Someone, or something, is definitely on this island. Adrian, Ragnarok, and Morsus begin to suffer from the heat. Dick notices that the roots are actually emitting blood everywhere that Adrian is cutting. He also notices that some of these plants are emitting these odd spores. Dick tries to use magic to blast the jungle, but the jungle seems somehow resistant to even his magic. Apostrophe manages to finally plow through them using his stone shape, which gives way to a clearing. In the clearing, you spy an entrance to a temple, which is a doorway that appears to be a giant baboon's mouth open wide. Just outside the doorway, there are 5 small humanoid creatures who appear reptilian in appearance. Their flesh varies from red to purple. Rex uses his stealth to approach the kobolds to try to overhear them. He hears them talking about a cultist inside and about how they're trying to raise a dead demon. Rex attempts to stealth back, but steps on several dry leaves, making crackling sounds. After a quick fight, the kobolds are defeated. The 3 remaining survivors are questioned and tortured for information and eventually killed. One of the names that the kobolds mentioned was Corvus. Dick uses his Arcana skill to know that this is an old human mage who has somehow lived beyond his years. Corvus was known for his interest in a demon lord by the name of Balgora. The party attempts to enter the temple, but a black liquid seems to prevent seeing inside. Apostrophe uses dancing lights, which seems to vanish 20 feet into the darkness. Adrian and Morsus enter this temple, and something inside that black liquid forces Adrian to succumb to its magical effects as he suddenly drifts asleep. Morsus decides to retreat and drag Adrian out with him. Dick fires a firebolt spell into the darkness and gives the party a chance to quickly run inside as the darkness parts with this light. However, in their haste, both Adrian and Apostrophe unwittingly trip an alarm in the darkness. This alerts 4 death dogs right inside that guard the entrance. A battle with the death dog ensues and nearly puts an end to the party, but they successfully finally defeat the death dogs. And that's where we end the first session. The party has successfully entered the temple of these cultists trying to raise a demon lord by the name of Balgora, who was slain many